All jokes aside, I received some well-deserved criticism in my video looking at Command & Conquer Generals for not talking about the plethora of mods available for it. So that's what we're going to do today. And now, while I can't look at every mod that's ever been made, what I can do is look at the most popular. So I've gone through the comments and I've installed the 3 most common suggestions of what to try, with those being Shockwave, Rise of the Reds, and Contra. As I'm sure you remember, I did have some qualms with playing Generals in 2019. Here's a quick refresher if you haven't seen that original video. If you used to play it back in the day, then I'm sure you'll have no problem diving back in, as the nostalgia alone will help you alleviate its 16-year-old trappings, like the graphics and a bit of modern PC compatibility issues that I ran into. It's still a blast to play and the gameplay is exciting enough to keep you entertained. However, it's not easy of a recommendation if you have never played it before and don't have those memories from when you were young. If you're looking for a classic, action-packed RTS from back in the day, then Generals will deliver. But in my opinion, it doesn't do anything in particular better than any other strategy game that is available today. Now, before we get into it, I just want to make clear that this is not a full review of any of these mods, more like my impressions of playing a few hours of each one. The question I'm looking to answer here is, will any of these mods change my opinion on Command & Conquer Generals today? So, without further ado, let's get into it. So, the first mod I've looked at here is Shockwave version 1.201, which is described as an enhancement mod for Zero Hour, with the main goal being to make Zero Hour a more interesting game with more diversity, choices, and strategic freedom. I've played a few games, each with different factions and generals, and my opinion is actually pretty positive. There's a lot of diversity when it comes to each general, of which there are now 4 per nation. Each have unique special abilities that are all effective and align with their faction specialization. Like I said, with its 12 possible choices, the variety is really solid, but it does still kind of feel like each sub-factions are at their core not very dissimilar from each other. There's over 100 units, and this greatly improves one of the main problems I had with Generals, and that the army makeup and unit types were somewhat generic and uninteresting. And while most of those original examples are still present here in Shockwave, the number of new ones added easily makes up for them. Lower level units are still decidedly uninspiring, but once you start unlocking and researching shiny new tech, you tend to forget about the stock standard main battle tank and turn your focus towards the slew of new units available to you, like the extremely commanding Emperor Overlord tank of China's Tank General, or King Comanche helicopters from the USA's Air Force General that you're delivering to the field. Along with new units, there's also a host of new structures, upgrades, abilities, and more to further define your chosen faction and gameplay style, which altogether make for an experience that has a lot more variety and pizzazz than before, while at the same time feeling quite similar to Zero Hour, which may be a good or a bad thing depending on what you're looking for. Shockwave also brings technical updates and changes to the table like new visuals, sound effects, and bug fixes. While I didn't notice a huge difference in terms of graphics and audio, I'm sure the ones out there who have played a lot more Generals than me will appreciate the additions. Overall, I did have fun with Shockwave, though I personally would prefer something that distances itself more from the game it's based on. Speaking of which, next up we have Rise of the Reds version 1.85. And while Shockwave didn't leave me with huge expectations, I have to say I was pleasantly surprised with what Rise of the Reds had to offer. It feels a lot more like a full expansion than just a fan-made mod. The main selling points for Rise of the Reds are its entirely brand new factions, in the form of the titular Reds, aka Russia, as well as the ECA, who are basically just NATO. Each are made with a level of professionalism that really impressed me, with wholly unique rosters of voice acting, 3D models and effects. They're excellent additions that I greatly prefer to Shockwave's faction variants. And while yes, there are only 5 options of who to play as, while Shockwave does have 12, the ones in Rise of the Reds are way more distinct, and in my opinion it's a lot more quality over quantity in this case. Both Russia and the ECA have a full suite of unique units, structures, research, general abilities and mechanics, and playing either feels like an entirely new Generals experience. I especially like playing as Russia with their badass black colour scheme, exciting unit types and powerful general abilities. Along with adding its 2 new factions, Rise of the Reds also makes sweeping changes to the game's original 3, the US of A, China and GLA. With a bevy of new units and mechanical changes, these base groups now feel far more diverse than before and have more of a focus on their core strengths, like air superiority for the USA and guerrilla tactics for the GLA. Like Shockwave, Rise of the Reds also adds new visuals and audio effects, and along with the brand new factions makes this mod feel like a real expansion. Hell, it could even pass as a sequel with the amount of additions, changes and iterations it makes. The new factions are especially great, and playing as either of them feels fresh, and it was something that I really enjoyed. The way the mod team was able to inject these 2 groups next to the game's original ones and not seem out of place is a notable feat, and everything just feels like it was meant to be there. I also want to give a special shout out to the voice acting, which matches the original game's level of sarcastic humour and over-the-top stereotypes perfectly. All things considered, Rise of the Reds was really impressive, and I can see why so many people see I needed to give it a go. The new factions are executed perfectly, and its changes to the base game make the entire experience feel really fresh. If you're looking for a mod that feels like an expansion in both size and quality, this is it. It's going to be tough to beat Rise of the Reds, so let's see if it's up to the task. Alright, last but not least, Contra 009. Like I said, I really enjoyed my time with Rise of the Reds, so it was already a tough battle for Contra going in. But to my surprise, I actually ended up loving it. It takes a similar approach to Shockwave by keeping 0 Hour's style of multiple generals per faction, which means that you again get 12 options of playable sub-factions to choose from. Like Shockwave, Contra also brings new graphics, sound effects and improved AI, but the main way it differentiates itself from its contemporaries are in the changes of units and abilities that are made for each playable general. While the other mods don't stray too far away from General's modern day-ish setting and technology, Contra really goes off the deep end with buckets of crazy new units, buildings and tech, with everything from cyborg infantry to drones to walking nuclear missile launchers. It's seriously awesome, and it feels a lot more like a Red Alert game than General's. The unit variety is really strong across all of the game's sub-factions, and each feel a lot more distinct from each other when compared to both 0 Hour and Shockwave. Picking the USA Robotics General, for example, gives you control of a nearly entirely unfeeling mechanical army, with walker mechs, flying drones, and cyborg dogs to fill out your army roster, while picking the Air Force General swaps those out for more traditional units and abilities. The creators did a great job in having so much variety between the 12 generals, and I'm thrilled with all the crazy technology they injected into the experience, as it solves one of my core issues with generals having a lot of boring and uninspired unit design. A key mechanical change Contra made was adding a rank system for unlocks and new buildings, which isn't present in any of the other mods we've looked at here. It's tied to the existing star system, and it basically gives you another reason to level up your general instead of just to unlock those shiny new abilities. Personally, I didn't care much for it, as I tend to play RTSs like a bit of a turtle, and I'd rather build up my strongest force before venturing out into combat. But I can see how people would like it, as it does encourage combat early on, and it prolongs players from getting their most powerful units, which could potentially lead to longer and more drawn out games. One other thing Contra adds is a challenge mode, which basically consists of you picking a general and going into a pre-made scenario versus the AI. And while most people will probably be playing Contra online or with a friend, the scenarios are actually quite challenging, with the unique setups and the AI improvements certainly helping in that department. You'll also hear the opposing general trash talking you along the way, which gives you a personal stake in really taking them down. I enjoyed my time with Contra, mostly because of its awesome unit design and amount of variation offered between all of its factions. While it still felt quite a bit like 0 Hour, though not as much as Shockwave, it offered enough for me to enjoy it a lot more than the base game. And with that, we're at the end. After playing 3 mods for Command & Conquer Generals, were any of them good enough to change my opinion on playing it in 2019? Well, yes actually, one did. And that one was Rise of the Reds. While Shockwave and Contra did add a lot of unit variation, graphical and audio improvements, as well as some other unique twists, neither did what Rise of the Reds could. With the addition of its 2 entirely new factions, major reworks of existing ones, and its graphical and audio improvements, Rise of the Reds was able to solve my main problems with Generals, while simultaneously adding a ton of content that made playing it feel fresh and completely unique. Plus, it did all of it to a level of quality that was truly impressive, and it honestly felt like it could easily be an official expansion. I enjoyed my time with it, and I'm legitimately glad you all convinced me to give these mods a go. If you're playing Generals without them in 2019, you're missing out. Thanks so much for watching. I'll have links to all the mods I tried out in the description so you can download them and give them a go yourself. Down there you'll also find my Twitter where you can follow me for updates on the channel and upcoming videos, and there's also a link to my Twitch channel where, among other things, I'll be streaming games that I'm currently making videos for if you want a bit of a sneak peek into what's coming in the future. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time.